The dying world. The skies of Xerath prime bled gray. Once silver towers rose proud above the crusted horizon, but now they lay half swallowed by dunes of toxic dust. Winds howled through the remains of a civilization that had burned everything, even its own breath. The Xerath had mastered every science except the one that mattered: how to coexist with the soil beneath them. Inside the planetary council spire, the last of the Xerath leadership gathered around a dim holographic sphere of their dying world. "Our atmosphere has reached critical collapse," intoned High Archivist Thelex, his crystalline carapace flickering dull blue. "We have no organic reservoirs remaining. Even our nutrient sinks are failing." "Then we evacuate," replied Counselor Ron, whose tone was sharper than broken glass. "We migrate to orbital habitats. Habitat cores require oxygen, water, organic carbon," Felix reminded. "Resources we no longer have." A silence followed, long, sterile, suffocating. The Xerath were not given to emotion, yet despair leaked through their collective frequency like static. They had spent centuries perfecting machines, forging metals, harvesting the planet's mantle. Every solution had been a calculation. Every decision had been efficient. And every efficiency had brought them closer to death. Then, a young xenoscientist spoke. "There is one anomaly, High Archivist." The council turned. The scientist projected an image, a barren moon orbiting a distant star. But instead of the dead stone they expected, they saw green. Lush forests stretched across what had once been scorched dust. Rivers shimmered in the sun. "Designation, Eden 3, said the scientist. "A Terran colony. Human." The council murmured in static tones. The humans, primitive bipeds, chaotic and emotional, were not considered advanced by Xerath standards. Yet here they were, turning dead worlds into living ones. Felix tilted his head. "Explain their method." "They dig," the scientist said awkwardly. "By hand. They plant seeds." Counselor Run's voice rose, filled with scorn. "Superstition." "Perhaps," Felix said. "But superstition that yields oxygen is wisdom in disguise. Prepare a delegation." The Xerath expedition departed in silence. Their ship, the Cynosure, cut through the void like a blade of obsidian. When they arrived at Eden 3, they expected to see vast reactors, orbital reflectors, industrial terraforming systems. Instead, they found people. The humans lived in domed greenhouses across the rocky plains. Steam rose from wet soil. The air smelled of life, a concept alien to Xerath's senses. Tiny pollinator drones buzzed lazily between flowering vines. And in the center of it all, a woman knelt in the dirt, humming softly as she worked. Dr. Sophia Reyes looked up as the Xerath approached. Her hands were covered in mud. Her hair was tied back with a strip of cloth. She grinned. "Visitors? Haven't had those in a while." The Xerath delegation stared at her in unison, their optical sensors whirring. Felix stepped forward, his translator crystal pulsing. "We seek your method of planetary reclamation. Explain the mechanism." Sophia blinked, then laughed. "Mechanism? You mean gardening. We mean the process that made this wasteland into this." He gestured to the fields of green. Sophia brushed soil from her gloves. "You're looking at it." She pointed to the ground. "Soil's alive. Feed it, it feeds you. That's all." "That cannot be sufficient," said Run, voice edged with disbelief. "There must be synthesis, catalytic reactors, nanite control systems." Sophia smiled. "Sure, we use tech, drones, bionanites, atmosphere scrubbers, but the core of it's simple. Life feeds life. You can't code that. You grow it." The Xerath were silent. Their sensors scanned the soil, the air, the plant roots, searching for the hidden mechanism. They found nothing, except millions of microorganisms, intertwined like a living network. It defied their sterile logic. Sophia stood, wiping her hands. "Come on, you want to learn? Grab some gloves." Run recoiled. "You wish for us to insert appendages into that filth." Sophia chuckled. "That filth is what makes your next breath possible." They followed her reluctantly to a row of seed trays. Sophia demonstrated. pressing small brown specks into moist earth, covering them gently. "These are marigolds," she said. "They clean soil and bring pollinators." Felix lowered himself, examining the seeds. "You bury potential to awaken it. That's one way to put it." He hesitated, then extended a slender, crystalline hand and pressed it into the soil. The texture startled him, soft, warm, chaotic. For the first time in his existence, he felt something that couldn't be measured or contained. Hours passed as humans and Xerath worked side by side. The humans laughed, teased, sang. The Xerath observed, analyzed, then slowly began to mimic. A few even hummed softly, their resonance matching human melody. When the sun dipped below the horizon, Sophia handed Felix a cup of steaming herbal brew. "You folks came to learn how we fight entropy," she said with a grin. "Turns out the answer's dirt simple." Felix gazed over the fields, their leaves glinting in the sunset. For the first time, his sensors registered color, real, natural color, not metallic gray, not synthetic light. He spoke quietly. "You reshape worlds with your hands?" Sophia smiled. "With hands and hope." Felix turned toward the horizon, watching green swallow the red dust. Hope. The word was strange in his language, yet it resonated low and deep like a pulse in the soil. That night, as the Xerath ship departed, Felix looked down at the world below, a once-dead moon now alive with color. For the first time, he didn't see a planet. He saw a promise. The seeds of change. The Xerath delegation returned to Eden, 3-1 rotation later, not as skeptics, but as students. Their ship descended through morning mist, its black hull mirrored in the wetlands that had grown since their first visit. What had once been redstone was now carpeted in green. Dr. Sofia Reyes stood waiting at the landing pad, hands on her hips, face streaked with mud and sunburn. "Back for another lesson. Shiny folks," she called with a grin. High Archivist Felix stepped out first, flanked by scientists and engineers. Their crystalline bodies shimmered faintly under the sunlight. "We have reviewed your data. We seek deeper understanding of this soil symbiosis." Sophia tossed him a pair of thick gardening gloves. "Then let's get your hands dirty." The training began at dawn. The humans called it radical gardening, not just planting, but reclaiming the dead. The Xerath called it inefficient, at least at first. Vats of compost steamed as microbes devoured waste and birthed nutrients. Human workers stirred the mixtures by hand while humming old Earth songs. Xerath engineers watched, confused. "You degrade organic material intentionally," observed scientist Vector, his voice like grinding glass. "Decay is typically undesirable." "Decay feeds new life," Sophia explained, tossing in another shovel of compost. "Nothing really dies. It just changes form." Vector tilted his head. "Entropy as nourishment. Paradoxical, yet elegant." Days turned into weeks. The Xerath learned to mix biochar, plant cover crops, and use drones to monitor soil respiration. But the heart of the process wasn't in the machinery, it was in the rhythm. Humans worked with life's unpredictable flow. They accepted imperfection, chaos, and mess as part of growth. The Xerath struggled with that. "You humans operate without precision," Run protested one day, watching a group of children scatter seeds unevenly. "Your methods lack order. Probability favors inconsistency." Sophia crouched beside him, pressing a seed into the earth. "That's the point. Life doesn't grow in straight lines. It grows where it can." Run's optic crystals dimmed in thought. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, awkwardly, he pressed a seed into the soil beside hers. By the third week, the Xerath had established their own garden plot, a sterile quadrant of carefully arranged seedbeds, moisture regulators, and nutrient lines. Everything was precise. Everything was controlled. Nothing sprouted. Frustrated, Vector brought his instruments to Sophia. "All environmental variables are optimal, yet growth has not occurred." "Explain." Sophia inspected their garden. Flawless symmetry, but lifeless. She brushed her hands on her knees. "You forgot something." "What variable?" She smiled faintly. "Imperfection. She knelt and dug into their soil, roughing it up, tossing in a handful of compost, earthworms, and even a bit of mud from her own garden. It's too perfect. Plants need diversity, microbes, fungi, bacteria, a little chaos. The Xerath watched, uneasy. To them, chaos meant decay. Yet, as days passed, tiny green shoots broke through the black soil. Life had chosen to trust them. That night, under Eden's twin moons, the humans and Xerath gathered around a campfire. The humans roasted food. The Xerath observed the flames, fascinated by combustion's beauty. "Tell me," Felix asked Sophia, "why do you persist with such primitive techniques? You have the technology to automate this entirely." Sophia poked the fire with a stick. "Because automation doesn't teach patience. You can grow food fast, sure, but growing meaning, that takes time." "Meaning," Felix repeated softly. "We have no word for that." "Then invent one," she said with a grin. The next cycle, Vector presented something extraordinary. He had combined Xerath crystalline tech with human fungal cultures, creating bioluminescent roots that glowed softly beneath the soil. The hybrid organisms absorbed toxins and converted them into harmless minerals. Sophia's eyes widened. "You did it. You made the soil clean itself." Vector's body emitted a soft hum, the Xerath version of pride. "Your methods lacked precision. I applied order to the chaos." She laughed. "Guess we're both learning from each other." Word spread fast. The hybrid soil system, dubbed Glowroot, began transforming barren fields into safe, fertile land. It was the first joint human-Xerath creation, born from dirt, disagreement, and shared curiosity. Over time, strange changes occurred among the Xerath themselves. Their sensors began detecting new wavelengths, their olfactory nodes registering scents. Vector once paused mid-task, his crystalline plates vibrating softly. "I detect volatile organic compounds. Pleasant." Sophia smiled. "That's called a flower scent." He leaned closer to a marigold, studying its golden hue. "Purpose. Beauty," she said simply. The word puzzled him, yet lingered. On the 30th day of training, the Xerath planted their first independent garden. Rows of glowing fungi and hybrid crops shimmered under the alien sun. Human children danced between them, their laughter echoing through the fields. Felix stood beside Sophia, watching. "Our ancestors built empires to outlast the stars," he said quietly. "Yet they could not preserve a single breath of clean air. You humans build life itself." Sophia looked out over the glowing gardens. "We don't build it. We just help it along." Felix's gaze fell to the soil, his crystalline fingers trailing over the moist earth. "It feels alive." "It is," she said. "And so are you." When the Xerath delegation prepared to leave, Vector turned to Sophia. "We will return to Xerath Prime," he said. "Our world is worse than this once was. But perhaps it, too, can change." Sophia handed him a small metal box. Inside were a few marigold seeds. "Every planet starts with one brave gardener," she said softly. "Be that one." Vector cradled the box as if it were a living thing. The light from the setting sun refracted through his crystalline body, scattering colors across the dirt. For the first time in centuries, Xerath eyes saw green reflected in their own glassy shells. And for the first time ever, they understood what hope looked like. The bloom of two worlds. The stars over Xerath Prime burned pale and distant, their lights swallowed by the planet's choking haze. What had once been the engine of a galactic civilization was now little more than a tomb of iron and glass. When Vector stepped off the transport ramp, he could smell the acid tang of decay. For the first time in his species' history, smell had meaning. The sensors built into his crystalline form trembled at the sensation. Dr. Sophia Reyes followed close behind, her breathing mask hissing. "Smells like the inside of an old battery," she muttered, scanning the lifeless horizon. "We'll need protective domes for the first phase." Vector nodded. "We have mapped the least toxic regions near the equatorial ridge. There is water deep below." Sophia grinned behind her mask. "Then that's where we start. Let's wake your world up." The first human Xerath restoration colony began within the skeleton of a ruined refinery. Once it had smelted ores for galactic warships. Now, its furnaces would serve as heat shelters for seed vaults. Human engineers assembled soil generators and atmosphere processors, while Xerath scientists configured energy field dampeners to neutralize radiation zones. For weeks, they worked side by side in silence. Different species, one goal. Sophia called the project the Garden of Reclamation. The first step, make soil. The Xerath watched in disbelief as humans piled compost, fungus, and broken down nanite dust into vats. You feed decay to poison, Vectar said. Exactly, Sophia replied. Rot eats rot. It's nature's way of cleaning house. When the first green sprouts appeared under containment domes, Xerath engineers gathered around like pilgrims before a miracle. They had seen machines rise from blueprints, but never life rising from death. But success came at a cost. The planet's toxic winds tore open domes, scattering seedlings into acid storms. Electrostatic discharges burned irrigation drones to molten shards. When Sophia arrived at the garden one morning, she found it blackened, an entire month of work erased overnight. Felix, now overseeing the planetary effort, met her in the ash. Your methods fail against nature's hostility, he said, voice tight. Our world rejects life. Sophia knelt, touching the charred soil. No world rejects life. Sometimes it just needs time. Run. The counselor who had always doubted the project stepped forward. We have wasted energy, resources, and pride. You promised rebirth, human. I see only more death. Sophia stood slowly. Then let's use it. Every death feeds the next generation. That's not loss, that's compost. Felix stared at her, confused yet unable to argue. Humans spoke in circles, but their results defied reason. Against all logic, they still believed. Vectar refused to abandon the project. He began studying the Glowroot hybrid, the glowing fungal network he'd created on Eden 3. He realized that if it could survive human toxicity, perhaps it could purify Xerath soil too. For 12 rotations, he worked in silence, fusing human mycelium DNA with Xerath photonic crystal matrices. Sophia assisted when she could, teaching him how to balance organic growth with environmental stress. The result was breathtaking. Lumaroot, a living lattice of crystalline fungi that pulsed with gentle light. It didn't just absorb toxins. It converted them into minerals plants could use. They planted the first Lumaroot network across the ruined valley. At first, nothing happened. Then, faint green light began crawling under the surface like veins awakening. Hours later, the wind carried something new, moisture, the first rainfall in centuries. The next morning, Sophia emerged from her shelter to find Xerath Prime changed. Patches of black soil shimmered with green. Raindrops clung to tiny sprouts, pushing through cracks in the steel earth. Vectar stood motionless, light flickering across his body. It works, he whispered. It works. Sophia laughed and lifted her mask, letting the damp air touch her skin. It stung, acidic still, but less so. You see, life doesn't ask permission. It just needs a chance. Run arrived, silent for once. He stared at the field of glowing roots. Impossible, he murmured. Beautiful, Sophia corrected. For the first time, Run didn't argue. Months passed, and green began to creep outward like slow fire. The Xerath constructed transparent domes filled with new plant varieties, some luminous, some crystal-leafed, others emitting soft harmonics. The once-dead planet now sang. Humans adapted Xerath resonant crystal tech into architecture, vast greenhouses shaped like spirals of light. Xerath artists began carving floral patterns into their crystalline bodies, seeing beauty in imperfection. They celebrated the first bloom festival, the day a wildflower bloomed outside any dome, unassisted, defiant, and free. Felix, who once spoke only in logic, approached Sophia during the festival. In his hand, he held the small flower, its petals trembling in the wind. It is fragile, he said softly. Sophia smiled. So are we. That's why it matters. Felix tilted his head. We once believed strength meant permanence. You humans show that strength is endurance through fragility. That's radical gardening, Sophia said, watching Xerath children chase each other through glowing grass. You grow, even when the odds say you shouldn't. As dusk fell, the valley shimmered with color, bioluminescent roots underfoot, luminous trees above, rivers sparkling with blue algae. Vector stood beside Sophia on a ridge overlooking their creation. I used to think life was something we engineered, he said. Now I see, it is something we join. Sophia looked out over the reborn land, the horizon now tinted green and gold. You didn't just save your planet, Vector. You changed what it means to be Xerath. He turned to her, crystalline eyes reflecting the glow of their garden. And you changed what it means to be alive. Above them, for the first time in centuries, the sky cleared. Starlight touched the ground, and the ground shimmered back. The world had begun to breathe again. The green dawn. 10 years had passed since the first seed touched the poisoned soil of Xerath Prime. What had once been a gray wasteland now shimmered with life. Rivers wound through glowing valleys, forests of silver-leaf trees whispered in the wind, and the air hummed softly with bioluminescent insects. From orbit, the planet no longer looked dead, it glowed. The verdant Accord headquarters, built from living crystal and woven vines, stood at the center of this reborn world. Humans and Xerath worked together inside its luminous halls, their voices echoing with calm purpose. Gone were the days of sterile debate and sterile worlds. Now, both species had learned to grow rather than conquer. Dr. Sophia Reyes walked through the Hall of Growth, boots crunching softly on a moss-lined path. Her once brown hair was streaked with silver now, her hands still scarred and calloused from years of work. She paused at a window and smiled. Below her stretched a sea of green. The Garden of Reclamation had become a living continent. She breathed deeply, the air warm and rich. You made it, old girl, she whispered to herself. You really made it. A soft hum rose behind her. Vector stood in the doorway, his crystalline form radiant with shifting greens and golds. Over the years, even the Xerath had changed. Their bodies had developed organic inclusions, living symbionts that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent life. You still speak to the soil, he said, voice deep and calm. Old habits, Sophia replied with a grin. It listens better than most politicians. Vector tilted his head, amusement vibrating through his carapace. The council requests your presence. The Accord is ready to expand. Other species seek your teaching. About time, she said, brushing dirt from her gloves. Let's go plant a few more miracles. The council chamber was a cathedral of living glass. Sunlight filtered through translucent leaves embedded in the walls, painting the air with shifting colors. Delegates from dozens of worlds filled the hall. Aquatic species floating in gel pods, avian forms perched along the rafters, and the stoic Xerath in the center. High Archivist Felix opened the session. His voice, once cold and mechanical, now carried warmth. 10 cycles ago, this planet was ash. Today it breathes, and humanity, through their reckless, wondrous methods, taught us that growth begins with surrender. A murmur of agreement swept through the chamber. Sophia stood and addressed them. You all have worlds that are dying, not because they were cursed, but because you forgot how to care. Radical gardening isn't a human secret. It's a universal truth. You feed what feeds you. She raised a small glass vial. Inside it floated a single glowing seed, part fungal, part crystalline, pulsing like a heartbeat. This is the Lumiseed. It carries Xerath resilience and Earth's persistence. Together, they can bring any soil back to life. The delegates watched in silence. Some skeptical, others hopeful. Vector stepped beside her. We were a species of builders, he said. We learned from humans to become growers. The two are not opposites, they are balance. The chamber erupted in soft resonance, the Xerath equivalent of applause. The Verdant Accord was ratified that day, an alliance not of militaries or economies, but of ecosystems. Its mission, to heal worlds instead of exploiting them. Weeks later, Sophia returned to her favorite place, the hill overlooking the world spire, the immense tree that dominated the horizon. Born from both human and Xerath genetics, it rose miles into the sky, its roots glowing beneath the ground like a planetary heartbeat. Its leaves shimmered in alternating hues of green and silver, scattering light across the valleys. She sat beneath it, her tools beside her, and smiled as a group of young Xerath children played nearby, chasing luminous insects through the grass. Their laughter was high-pitched and musical, resonant like wind chimes. Vectar joined her, carrying 2 mugs of herbal brew. He set one beside her and sat silently for a long moment. "When we first met," he said, "you told me life doesn't ask permission. I did not understand then. Now I see. Neither does change." Sophia sipped the drink and chuckled. "Yeah, it sneaks up on you. One day you're fighting dirt. The next you're watching trees grow taller than skyscrapers." He turned to her, the glow of the world spire reflected in his eyes. "We once sought immortality through machinery. Now, through roots and seeds, we have found eternity instead." "Not eternity," she said softly. "Legacy." As evening fell, the sky burned gold and violet. A soft wind carried the scent of pollen and rain. Across the plains, thousands of bioluminescent plants pulsed to life, lighting the world like stars fallen to earth. Vectar looked upward. "Humans once fought for the stars. Now you teach others to bring them down to the soil." Sophia smiled, eyes glistening. "You can't live among the stars if you don't know how to live on your own planet first." He inclined his head. "Then this green dawn, is the truest conquest." She looked out over the vast, living landscape. "No, this is the truest home." Later, as darkness settled, the world spire emitted a low hum that rippled through the valley. Xerath and humans alike paused, listening. The tree's song, deep, resonant, filled with harmonics of both biology and crystal, was the planet itself breathing. Children raised their hands toward it. Adults bowed their heads. And above them, the once gray clouds parted, revealing a night sky clear and infinite. From orbit, the view of Xerath Prime stunned observers across the galaxy. Where there had once been a dead world, there now shone a green beacon, a living monument to cooperation, patience, and dirt-covered hope. Sophia placed a hand on the ground. The soil was warm beneath her palm. She smiled and whispered, "We did it." Vectar turned to her. "You taught us how to survive," he said quietly. "But more than that, you taught us how to belong." The world spire's light brightened, casting them both in gold and silver. And somewhere beneath the surface, roots reached a little deeper, pulling the stars closer to the earth.